On 18th June 2023, at 9:30 a.m., 5 people sat in a submersible called Titan, you might have seen it on the news lately, and dove into the sea. They were going to see the wreck of the Titanic. The same historical ship, Titanic, had sunk into the sea about 100 years ago. This is an extreme form of adventure tourism, and it is extremely expensive. Each person sitting in the submarine had spent more than $20 million. That too for a few hours of this expedition. Now, this trip is so expensive because the Titanic's wreck is hidden deep in the sea. Specifically speaking, 3,810 meters below the surface of the water. Now, this submarine started its journey under the water, and it takes about 2 hours to reach the depth of 3,810 meters. Now, at every 15-minute interval, this submarine sends a signal to the support ship on the surface of the sea. The support ship's name was the Polar Prince. For them, this was the only way to communicate with the outside world. And on that day, 18th June, it had only been 1 hour and 45 minutes of the submarine's dive into the sea that suddenly it loses contact with the support ship on the sea. 4:30 p.m., by the time when the submarine should have come back up after its tour, there is no sign of it. At 7:10 p.m., the team in the Polar Prince decided to inform the US Coast Guard. And from here, a 4-day-long multinational search began. A large-scale search and rescue operation is carried out to find this tiny submersible. Aircraft, ships, and robot vehicles were also used. Everyone had only one question in their mind: what happened to these passengers? The US Coast Guard says that the debris from the Titan has been brought to the surface from the ocean floor. Now, before we venture into the deep seas, let me thank and appreciate you right now on camera. It is so wonderful that you are not a time waster. Yes, when most people are watching other just dots, you are here enhancing your knowledge. So to make your presence here worthwhile, drop a like and smash that subscribe button. Now let us understand the story of the Titan submersible. The place where the submarine disappeared is in the Atlantic Ocean, near Canada. Take a look at this map. 600 kilometers away from Newfoundland, a Canadian island. At this place, in the depths of the water, you will find the wreck of the Titanic, broken into 2 parts, the bow and the stern. They both lie about 800 meters away from each other. The Titan submarine that disappeared here was not a submarine, but it was actually submersible. Now, these 2 words are extremely similar to each other, so you might have been confused in the start. So, till now, I was using the word submarine to simplify things, but there is a very important difference between these 2 words. Submarines have their power. They can use a port to go into the sea and come out of the sea independently, but submersibles cannot do that. So that's the main difference. This is very important, so make sure you remember this throughout the whole video. Now, to launch a submersible into the water and for it to come back up, a support ship is needed. A ship that is present on the surface of the water and is controlling basically everything. In our case, the support ship was the Polar Prince. This entire operation was run by a company called OceanGate, whose CEO was Stockton Rush. Now, remember his name because he plays an important role in this story. Now, by profession, he has been an aerospace engineer, and in 2009, he founded the OceanGate company, which also plays a huge role in this story. Now, what is OceanGate? OceanGate is a private company whose purpose was to take rich people on deep-sea expeditions as tourism. Now, as you can still see on their website, apart from the Titanic, there were other expeditions to Azores and Bahamas. Titan was also not the only submersible of this company. Apart from this, OceanGate had 2 other submersibles, Antipods and Cyclops. Antipods could go down to 304 meters, which was still impressive, but compared to Cyclops, it was nothing. Cyclops could go up to 500 meters. Now, Cyclops was absolutely nothing compared to the Titan, which could go down to 4,000 meters. This is why this was the only submersible to go down to the Titanic. To visualize the frightening depths of 3,800 meters, look at this chart created by the Washington Post. Measurements are in feet here. Normally, a man's height is at least 6 foot. The iceberg that collided with the Titanic was 100 feet above the surface of the water, and several times that underwater. 130 feet is the maximum depth that a recreational scuba diver can go while scuba diving. After 650 feet, though, the twilight zone starts. It's where only a small amount of light can penetrate through the depths of the water. 1,600 feet was the depth of the deepest ever underwater rescue operation conducted to date. 2,600 feet, however, is where giant squids swim. Now, giant squids are so scary that they almost look like they've come from some alien planet. Take a look at their photos. Now, if you go further down, a midnight zone starts after 3,800 feet. This is where the Titan went. No sunlight reaches below this mark. Everything turns black, absolutely pitch dark, and the water temperature here is around 4 degrees Celsius. That is how bad it is. The pressure at this depth is almost 400 times the pressure of the surface. So whichever submersible goes to this depth, its design would be thoroughly thought out. The glass for looking outside, the size of the window, could be only this big. And the window in the Titan submersible, which is called a viewport, was the biggest viewport that has ever been installed on any private submersible to date. Now, the Titan submersible itself was not that big. It had the capacity and the seatings of only 5 people. Its main body, which is called the hull, was made out of carbon fiber, which was a huge mistake. 2 caps were attached at the end, which were made out of titanium, and the total length of it was approximately 6.7 meters, and it weighed more than 10,400 kilograms. In its design, as you can see, there were 4 electric thrusters outside, 2 horizontal and 2 vertical, through which it could be operated. Now, an interesting fact to be noted here is that this sub was controlled by a video game controller.
We have one button, that's it. It should be like an elevator.
I couldn't help noticing how many pieces of this sub seemed improvised.
We can use these off-the-shelf components.
I got these from Camper World. We run the whole thing with this game controller.
This is not as weird as it sounds, actually, because the US Navy also controls their submarines and their periscopes with these controllers. But yes, the entire submarine Titan was being controlled with a video game controller. This means that the pilot who was operating the submersible in the water was only using the video game controller, which was not as smart. If you look at it inside, there were no seats to sit inside, but a small toilet was provided, which was beside the viewport. But there was no barrier to the toilet, so they said that there's no privacy at all. Somebody had to use the toilet and others would have to face the other way. To keep looking at a TV screen, the toilet went while the toilet was being used. Now, this is the only toilet available in a deep diving submersible. That's in-house. So you can just look at the viewport instead, but then again, there is absolutely no privacy, and it's just disgusting. Now, pull the privacy screen and turn up the music, because these submersibles go so deep into the water that the GPS doesn't work here. The communication with the support ship was carried on through a text messaging system. It is still unclear which internet connection was available on the ship. In this tweet from a few backs, OceanGate had said that they were going to use Starlink satellite internet service to communicate. Now, if we come back to the story of 18th June, then 5 people were on board the submersible that day. The first was 58-year-old British billionaire Hamish Harding. He was an adventurer and a 3 times Guinness World Record holder. In 2016, he went to the South Pole with astronaut Buzz Aldrin. At one time, he did a 4-hour dive into the deepest part of the ocean, the Mariana Trench. And guess what? Last year, he was part of the Blue Origin suborbital flight, which was started by the space exploration company of Jeff Bezos. The second passenger was Paul Henry, 77-year-old, a former commander of the French Navy. He had visited the Titanic wreck 37 times, so I don't know what he was doing there the 38th time. Anyways, he was a director of underwater researcher for the RMS Titanic. The third and fourth passengers were a British-Pakistani businessman, Shehzada Dawood, and his 19-year-old son, Solomon. He was the owner of one of the biggest companies in Pakistan. Solomon's aunt had said that Solomon was scared of going, but he went with his father to please him and to give him the company on his journey. Now, as I told you, the submersible was communicating with a support ship. Now, at every 15 minutes interval. This communication stopped at 11:15 a.m. After this, no signal and no communication is received. Despite this, it was expected that the Titan would resurface at 4:30 p.m. as scheduled. Because if by chance the submersible would get stuck in the water, there was a way for the passengers to tilt it from inside and push it back and forth to bring it back up. Now, by this time, you can see how unprofessional the idea of this Titan was and how they basically just took it as a joke. Now, this is done by removing the ballasts. Ballasts are an important part of big ships and submarines to provide stability. They are nothing more than heavyweights. With their help, submarines can descend into the water. In the olden days, stones and sandbags were used, but now they've got more technology, so they've advanced. Now, ballast tanks are filled with water so that the weight increases and submarines sink into the water. At 4:30 p.m., however, when the Titan did not resurface, people in the support ship waited for a while and then notified the US Coast Guard at 7:10 p.m. After this began the Great Race. The race against time. 96 hours, only 4 days of oxygen supply was left and available in the Titan. So if a rescue operation had not been conducted, they only had 4 days to find the passengers alive. Often an emergency locator is installed on ships. That is, if they go for any repurposement. But on the Titan, none of this was located. That is because they were scared that since it is so trashed, they wouldn't allow it in the water. But since it wasn't, then the emergency position indicating a radio beacon, EPIRB, was not located. With the help of this, these vessels can be located, but if it was not installed, they couldn't do anything about it. Here another problem was that even if Titan would have come back to the surface of the sea, people sitting inside it would have died due to the lack of oxygen, because there was no way to open this submersible from the inside. You heard it right. The door of this submersible could only be locked down from the outside, and opened those 4 days were very critical. The crew closes the hatch from the outside with 7 bolts. Tell me, how is a person 5 people from the inside? How are they meant to open a door that's locked with 17 big bolts? On top of it, the search area was 25,000 kilometers. Imagine how difficult it would have been to find a van-sized submersible in such a huge area. The area was 7 times bigger than the state of Goa. And the deepest underwater rescue that has been done so far was only done at a depth of 480 meters underwater in 1973. But still, the rescue teams put their lives on stake. Initially, 2 American and 2 Canadian aircrafts started this operation. Sonar was deployed by them so that they could detect signals even from underwater. 3 ships started the search from the surface. But as time passed, more ships started to come in for the search operation. At half-an-hour intervals, some noises were heard, like someone knocking on the door. Later, the US Coast Guard also heard the noise. Finally, on 22nd June, an ROV searching on the ocean floor encountered some debris, around 490 meters away from the Titanic's bow. It was confirmed upon seeing the debris that the submersible had broken apart. The people who were sitting inside it had lost their lives. After searching some more, 5 pieces of debris were found in total. On the same day, the US Coast Guard confirmed in the press conference that the banging noises they heard had nothing to do with the Titanic, submersible. The conclusion was derived from Titan imploded due to the high pressure. You might have been thinking that implosion means bursting, but it is the opposite of an explosion. Explosion means bursting. We use the word explosion when there is an outbreak or eruption, like a bomb explosion. The force moves outwards, but the force of an implosion moves inwards, breaking apart due to being squeezed in, that is, implosion. Catastrophic implosion means that the implosion happened so fast that the entire structure was destroyed, but it didn't even take a millisecond. This means that the people sitting inside were killed immediately, in the blink of an eye, but they didn't feel it. The question here is, what was the reason behind this implosion? The main body of the Titan, as I said, it was made out of carbon fiber. But usually submarines and submersibles are made out of steel, titanium, or aluminium. This carbon fiber design of Titan was experimental. No one had ever tested the properties of carbon fiber in such depths of the ocean before. And looking at this disaster, we can say that carbon fiber is not suitable material for this use case. As said by an ocean explorer, Robert Ballard, you might know of him, he's quite famous. The man who discovered the wreck of the Titanic in 1985. He said that they have done thousands of dives in different vehicles to get to the bottom of the ocean, but they have never lost a vehicle. This was the first time that a submarine or a submersible imploded in this way. If you look at our history, he said, it's safer to be in a submarine like Alvin, the one he spent many years in, than driving on I-95s. James Cameron said, the director of famous films like Titanic and Avatar. He has been to the deep sea many times for various expeditions. He said the same thing. The caps of titanium were still intact on the seafloor unharmed. But the main body of carbon fiber is now scattered in pieces. He strongly criticized Titan, saying the safety regulations were not followed, which he had the right to say that because they weren't. Now, if you see the old interviews of OceanGate Company's CEO, you will hear the same thing again and again. In 2019, a long article was published in Smithson magazine in which the CEO was talking about OceanGate. He said that the US Passenger Vessel Safety Act of 1993 closely prioritizing passenger safety over commercial innovation. He felt that this act is useless and that there is no need to pay so much attention to safety. In another interview last year, he said at some point safety is just pure waste. I mean, if you don't want to be safe, don't get out of bed, don't get in your car, don't do anything. At some point, safety is just pure waste. I mean, if you just want to be safe, just don't do anything, nothing at all. After this, he says, I've broke some rules to make Titan. I think I've broken them with logic and good engineering behind me. But the carbon fiber and titanium, that's the main one. This can tell you how much of what type of personality and how much safety you can see was provided, and the outcomes showed that. Stockton Rush, the CEO, if you forgot, he conducted an experiment that he knew it was risky, but he still did it. Do you think that was a good decision? Now, in January 2018, OceanGate's Director of Marine Operations, David Lockridge, mentioned safety concerns about Titan's submersible. And when OceanGate did not pay any heed to the warnings, He went to court with it. In the court, he stated that there should be more a safety assessment, which there should, and certification of this submersible, but OceanGate refused. He said that this company was not interested in spending money on safety. The legal battle in the court was eventually settled later in 2018. But on 27th March 2018, 36 people wrote a letter to Stockton Rush. Letter was written by industry leaders, deep-sea explorers, oceanographers, and other people. They said that the experimental approach being taken, not getting things quality checked, can lead to a terrible accident, which it did. And in March 2018, another deep-sea exploration specialist had written an email to the CEO to be a little conservative about safety. He had written that Rush was putting himself and his clients in danger in the race to reach the Titanic. Rush was accused of repeating the same phrase, "She is unsinkable." This is something that happened with the Titanic. Even then, they blindly said that she is unsinkable when I think we all know what really happened. This teaches us that safety standards and regulations should never be ignored. Now, we have indeed concluded, but not for a while. I will be uploading more videos than you will ever imagine. So, what are you waiting for? Click on any of these videos and I'll see you in the next one.
Basic and slimy as ever. Life is too grimy, y'all watch for the devil. It's a Rolls Royce and it come with umbrellas. 2018 in that Porsche Corolla. Yeah, pouch. Racks in a quarter ounce. 2 accounts. Large amount. Yeah. Shop around. Designer down. Dribble drown. Dribble drown.